Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid were best friends for 3 years. They drank together in Fort Sumner saloons. They played cards until sunrise. They watched each other's backs when things went bad. Billy trusted Pat with his life. Pat knew every hideout, every habit, every person Billy cared about. Then Governor Lew Wallace offered Pat $500 to hunt Billy down. Pat took the job. 3 months later, he pulled the trigger in a dark bedroom at midnight. Billy never saw it coming. This is the story of the most brutal friendship betrayal in Old West history. A friendship that ended with a bullet. A manhunt that turned friend against friend. A moment when loyalty died for money. Fort Sumner, New Mexico Territory, July 1881. The friendship nobody expected. Billy the Kid and Pat Garrett met in 1878. Billy was 19 years old, already wanted for multiple killings, already dangerous. Pat was 30, a tall drifter working odd jobs, tending bar, running cattle. They shouldn't have been friends. Pat was quiet, calculated, patient. Billy was wild, impulsive, always laughing. But they connected. For 3 years they were inseparable. They rode together across Lincoln County. They gambled in the same saloons. When Billy needed to lay low, Pat covered for him. When Pat needed money, Billy shared his take. They had each other's secrets. Pat knew Billy's aliases, his safe houses, his romantic entanglements. Billy knew Pat's debts, his ambitions, his weaknesses. Everyone in Fort Sumner saw them together. The friendship was real. Witnesses confirmed it. Saloon records show them drinking side by side. Letters mention their bond. This wasn't casual acquaintance. This was brotherhood. Pat knew Billy's tells at poker. Billy knew when Pat was bluffing. They shared bottles of whiskey on cold nights. They laughed about the law coming after Billy. Pat never judged. Billy never worried. Then Pat got married. Then he needed steady money. Then the political situation in New Mexico changed everything. The Lincoln County War had ended, but Billy the Kid was still wanted. Governor Lew Wallace wanted him captured or dead. The territory needed law and order. Someone had to clean up the mess, and someone had to go after Billy. November 1880. Pat Garrett was elected sheriff of Lincoln County. Billy congratulated him. They were still friends. Pat hadn't changed. Not yet. But the governor made an offer. $500 to bring in Billy the Kid, dead or alive. That's $15,000 in today's money. Pat had a wife now. He had responsibilities. He needed that money. Pat accepted the job. The hunt begins. December 1880. Pat Garrett became Billy's hunter. Billy didn't believe it at first. When someone told him Pat was coming after him, Billy laughed. "Pat wouldn't hurt me," he said. "We're friends." Billy kept visiting Fort Sumner, kept seeing mutual friends, kept acting like nothing had changed. But Pat had changed. He assembled a posse, 7 men who would track Billy across the territory. Pat knew every place Billy would run. He knew Billy's routine, his favorite hideouts, his trusted contacts. He knew Billy would go to Fort Sumner to see Paulita Maxwell, the woman Billy loved. He knew Billy's habits better than anyone alive. Pat used that knowledge like a weapon. First confrontation came at Stinking Springs. Pat surrounded an old stone house where Billy and his gang were hiding. 4 outlaws trapped inside. Pat's posse outside with rifles. Dawn breaking cold and brutal. Charlie Boder stepped out first. Pat shot him dead. Boder staggered back inside, dying. "I wish," Boder said to Billy, "I wish I'd never met you." He collapsed. Billy surrendered. He had no choice. No food, no water, no escape. Pat took him alive. They rode back together. Billy in chains. Pat on horseback beside him. They barely spoke. Billy kept looking at Pat, trying to understand what had happened to his friend. Pat wouldn't meet his eyes. April 1881. Billy was convicted of murder and sentenced to hang. Pat Garrett escorted him to jail in Lincoln. They locked Billy in an upstairs room of the courthouse. 2 guards watched him 24 hours a day. Bob Olinger and James Bell, both armed. Billy was chained to the wall. Pat visited him once. They talked for 10 minutes. Nobody recorded what they said. When Pat left, Billy was still smiling. He thought Pat would help him escape. He thought their friendship still meant something. Billy was wrong. April 28, 1881. Billy escaped. He killed both guards. He rode out of Lincoln while the whole town watched. Pat Garrett wasn't there. He was in White Oaks collecting taxes. When word reached him that Billy had escaped, Pat's face went cold. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "I'll finish this." The final hunt. Pat knew where Billy would go. Fort Sumner. Back to Polita Maxwell. Back to the only place Billy felt safe. Pat didn't tell anyone his plan. He took 2 deputies, John Poe and Thomas McKinney. They rode quietly. No announcements, no big posse, just 3 men hunting one. They arrived at Fort Sumner on July 14, 1881, near midnight. The town was dark. Pat went straight to Pete Maxwell's house. Pete was Paulita's brother, a friend to both Billy and Pat. Pat trusted him. Pat walked into Pete's bedroom without knocking. Pete was in bed, half asleep. Pat sat down on the edge of the bed. "Where's Billy?" Pat asked. Pete hesitated. He knew what would happen if he answered, but Pat wasn't asking. Pat was demanding. "He's here," Pete finally said. "In town. He might come by tonight." Pat waited in the dark bedroom. His deputies stayed outside, watching the porch. Minutes passed like hours. Then Billy appeared. He'd been at a friend's house nearby. He was hungry. He knew Pete Maxwell sometimes had fresh beef. Billy walked barefoot across the dusty yard. He was wearing only pants and a shirt. No gun belt, no boots, just a knife in his hand for cutting meat. Billy stepped onto Pete Maxwell's porch. He saw 2 men he didn't recognize, Pat's deputies, standing in shadows. Billy got nervous. He backed toward the door. "¿Quién es?" he called out. "Who is it?" The deputies didn't answer. They didn't know it was Billy. They thought he was just some local. Billy stepped inside Pete Maxwell's bedroom. It was dark. He could barely see. "Pete," Billy whispered. "Who are those men outside?" Pat Garrett was sitting 3 feet away from him. Pete Maxwell didn't answer. He couldn't. He was frozen. Billy sensed something wrong. He raised his knife. He peered into the darkness, his eyes adjusting. "¿Quién es?" he said again. "Who's there?" Pat recognized Billy's voice. After 3 years of friendship, after hundreds of conversations, after shared secrets and shared bottles, Pat knew that voice. Pat Garrett drew his revolver. He aimed at where Billy's voice came from. He couldn't see clearly, just a silhouette in doorway darkness. Billy saw movement. He stepped closer. "Pete?" he said. "Is that you?" Pat Garrett fired. The bullet hit Billy just above the heart. Billy gasped. He staggered backward. He dropped the knife. He tried to speak but couldn't. He fell. Pat fired again. The second shot missed. Billy was already down. The whole thing took 6 seconds. From the moment Billy entered the room to the moment he died. 6 seconds to end 3 years of friendship. 6 seconds to collect $500. The aftermath. Nobody expected. Billy the Kid died on Pete Maxwell's bedroom floor at approximately 12:15 a.m., July 15, 1881. He was 21 years old. He never drew a weapon. He never had a chance. Pat Garrett stood up. He walked to the body. He looked down at his dead friend. Witnesses later said Pat's hands were shaking. Some said he was crying. Pat never confirmed either. The deputies rushed in. "Is it him?" they asked. "It's him," Pat said. His voice was flat, empty. Within an hour, the whole town knew. Billy the Kid was dead. Pat Garrett had killed him. The legendary outlaw gunned down in the dark by the man who knew him best. The territory celebrated. Governor Wallace sent congratulations. The newspapers called Pat a hero. Law and order had won. Billy the Kid, the most wanted outlaw in New Mexico, was finally dead. Pat Garrett collected his $500. But something broke in Pat that night. People noticed. He wasn't the same. Friends said he drank more. He gambled more. He couldn't sleep. Some nights he'd sit outside and stare at nothing. Pat tried to write a book about killing Billy. The authentic life of Billy the Kid. He needed money. The $500 was gone. But the book didn't sell well. Nobody wanted to read about friendship betrayal from the betrayer's perspective. Years passed. Pat's life fell apart. His marriage struggled. His money disappeared. He took jobs as lawman, but nothing stuck. He got in fights. He made enemies. The man who killed Billy the Kid became bitter, broke, and broken. People whispered. They said Pat regretted it. They said he saw Billy's face every night. They said the friendship haunted him more than any ghost. Pat never admitted regret publicly, but he also never spent that $500. Records show he gave most of it away. Some to Billy's friends, some to churches, some disappeared. Friends said Pat couldn't touch money that came from Billy's blood. Fort Sumner buried Billy in the old military cemetery. No headstone at first, just a wooden cross. The grave became a pilgrimage site. Outlaws came to pay respects. So did lawmen. So did ordinary people who heard the story. Pat Garrett never visited the grave. The truth about betrayal. Pat Garrett lived 27 more years after killing Billy. 27 years of decline. His reputation as a lawman faded. His business ventures failed. He became a drunk, a gambler, a man haunted by one night in July 1881. February 29, 1908. Pat Garrett was shot and killed on a road near Las Cruces, New Mexico. He was 57 years old. The official story was a dispute over a land lease, but some said it was revenge. Some said one of Billy's old friends finally settled the score. Pat died on a dusty road with a bullet in his back, just like he'd shot Billy, in the dark, without warning. The man who killed Pat was never convicted. Some said it was self-defense. Some said it was justice. The truth died with Pat. But here's what history confirms. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid were genuine friends. Documented by witnesses, letters, and historical records. They trusted each other. They protected each other. For 3 years, they were brothers. Then money changed everything. $500 ended a friendship. Ended a life. Ended Pat's soul. The night Pat killed Billy, he didn't just shoot an outlaw. He shot the only friend who knew him completely. The only friend who never judged. The only friend who accepted him exactly as he was. Billy trusted Pat until the last second. Even in that dark bedroom, Billy didn't draw a weapon. He didn't fight. He called out, "Quien es?" Not in challenge, but in confusion. He thought he was safe in Pete Maxwell's house. He thought nobody would hurt him there. He thought Pat was still his friend. The legacy of lost brotherhood. Pete Maxwell's house still stands in Fort Sumner. Tourists visit the room where Billy died. The bullet hole is still there, preserved. A reminder. Billy's grave is there too. The headstone has been stolen multiple times. Each time, the town replaces it. People leave flowers, coins, notes. The outlaw who died at 21 is still remembered. Pat Garrett's grave is in Las Cruces. Fewer people visit. No flowers, no notes. Just a stone with his name and the dates of his life. And one line underneath, "Sheriff who killed Billy the Kid." That's his legacy. Not hero, not lawman, just the man who betrayed his friend for money. Historical researchers have studied their relationship extensively. Letters prove the friendship was real. Witness testimony confirms they were close. Saloon records show them together repeatedly. This wasn't myth. This wasn't exaggeration. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid were best friends who became hunter and hunted because a governor offered $500. The most heartbreaking detail? Pat never needed the money that badly. His wife had some family money. His sheriff's salary was decent. The $500 was significant, but not life-changing. He didn't kill Billy because he was desperate. He killed Billy because he wanted to prove he could do the job. He wanted to be respected as a lawman. He wanted a reputation. He got one, but it destroyed him. Think about your closest friend, the person who knows your secrets, the person you trust completely, the person you'd protect without question. Now imagine they're offered money to hunt you down. Would they take it? Would they track you for months? Would they wait in the dark and pull the trigger? Pat Garrett did. 3 years of friendship, hundreds of nights drinking together, countless conversations, shared laughter, shared trust. Billy the Kid died instantly, but Pat Garrett died slowly over 27 years, haunted by the friend he killed for $500 he never spent. Historical fact. Pat Garrett never recovered from killing Billy. Friends confirmed he was never the same man. Fort Sumner, New Mexico, July 14, 1881. The night friendship became murder. The night $500 cost 2 lives. The night the Old West learned that some betrayals never heal. Billy trusted Pat until his last breath. Pat regretted that trust for the rest of his life. Which death was worse?